Welcome back. Picking up on our reading of the laws of Lashon Hora. This would be part 2. And I dedicate this read to Ed Pisker and the Pisker family. I want to mention that whether it be a religious community, rabbis themselves, theologians, Christian or otherwise, I'm not here to represent the orthodoxy or any, represent anything to do with any religious affiliation. I don't feel I have that right. And there are many people who are more qualified to do this. What I'm simply doing is reading an English version of the codification of the Hoviksheim, which is a codification of speech, directly dealing with that of what is called evil or derogatory speech, which causes so much harm. I'm not getting up on a hypocritical horse. I am just as guilty as these things as many others are. Not condoning, but I do think something can be derived from these teachings for some of us to ponder on, especially in this day and age when we're talking about the last, close to 3 decades of high school suicides due to bullying online, that sort of thing. It's a new kind of social dynamic to someone my age. We look at it in 2 ways. It's a terrible thing to do, ganging up on someone, yet at the same time it's also terrible that the person who is victimized by it caves. Because, and that's where I think something like this comes into play, either from a religious source or whatnot. It comes into play because it stands against what both parties accept as the norm. This is how it is. This is how people are. You can't do anything about it, so therefore, it may be the right thing to do to take my life because, of the maliciousness. I mean, right off the bat, I think most of us know, and you know probably, that suicide is not an option in Judaism. Judaism pretty much stands on the point that suicide is murder, as far as the degree as an offense. But anyway, that's not the point exactly. What I'm getting around to. This is about derogatory speech, and as I said, we're returning to our reading, and we'll pick up right from there. Enough of my stuff. Oh, and by the way, in the 31 list that we took a look at in the last 2 videos, I just want to get something out there. Genesis, Leviticus, Exodus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, these have different names. Genesis, for example, is Bereshit. Exodus is Shemot. Leviticus, Vayikra. Numbers would be Bamidbar. And Deuteronomy, finally, it would be Devarim. So you'll hear those quotes come up. Those are the 5 the first 5 books of Moses, and so just so it doesn't confuse anyone. Okay, so back to it. Laws of Lashon Hora, Chapter 1. 1. True and false derogatory statements. You are forbidden to relate anything derogatory about others. If a derogatory statement is true, it is termed Lashon Hora. If it is false, even partially so, it is termed Motzi Shayim Ra, defamation of character. And the offense is much, much more severe. It cannot be repeated often enough that true derogatory statements are considered Lashon Hora. The most common defense to a rebuke for speaking Lashon Hora is, "But it is true." That is exactly what categorizes the statement as being Lashon Hora. Constant review. A shochet is required to constantly review the laws of Shikata until he knows them by heart. Similarly, everyone is required to be thoroughly familiar with the laws of Lashon Hora. When one speaks, one must be aware of what is permissible to say and what is prohibited. Chovek Chaim in Chovas Hashmira 3. Number 2. 31 mitzvos. By speaking Lashon Hora, you violate numerous Torah commandments, a total of 31 mitzvot, 17 prohibitions, and 14 positive commandments. Those are what we covered in the last 2 videos. Have either a direct or indirect connection with Lashon Hora. These have been enumerated above. Who wants life? The Talmud, Avodah Zorah 19b, relates that Reb Alexandri called out, "Who wants life? Who wants life?" A large crowd soon gathered. They said to him, "Give us life." Reb Alexandri proceeded with a quote from Tehillim 34, 13-14, verse. "Who is the man who desires life and loves days that he may see the good? Guard your tongue from evil and your lips from speaking deceit." At first glance, this seems puzzling. What novel idea did Reb Alexandri reveal to those people? He merely cited a verse known by all. The Chovek Chaim explained thus. When the people first heard Reb Alexandri's offer of life, they thought he was selling a drug or medicine that had the power to increase a person's lifespan. But he showed them a spiritual drug that can actually give a person long life in this world, as well as Olam Haba, the world to come. It is worth noting that the Chovek Chaim lived for almost 100 years. Every single word of Lashon Hora is a separate transgression, and this is multiplied by the amount of commandments violated by the narrative. If someone speaks merely 10 words of Lashon Hora a day, in the course of a year, he will have spoken thousands of words of Lashon Hora. But in fact, someone who doesn't guard himself from Lashon Hora will speak hundreds of forbidden words every day. On the other hand, if a person is careful, he is credited with a mitzvah for every moment that he refrains from speaking Lashon Hora. Since we are dealing with such an enormous amount of mitzvot, we can understand why refraining from Lashon Hora has a special life-giving quality. Chovas Hashmira 1. 3. Habitual speakers of Lashon Hora. Someone who only speaks Lashon Hora occasionally is guilty of a serious sin, but those who habitually gossip about the faults of others are guilty of a much graver sin, since they contemptuously and repeatedly disregard one of Hashem's Yisborach's mitzvos, deeds. Habitual offenders can often be found sitting around making disparaging remarks about others. Reuven is a good-for-nothing. Just the other day, don't think that Leah is so special. She comes from a family that... Do you know what I just heard about Shimon? Our sages have labeled these people Belai, Lashon Hora, habitual speakers of Lashon Hora. The Talmud, Irchin 15b, states that someone who constantly speaks Lashon Hora commits sins greater than idolatry, adultery, and murder. Did you get that? The enormity of constantly speaking evil of others is such that the Baal, Lashon Hora, loses his share in Olam Haba unless he does Teshuvah. Yerushalmi, Paya 1:1. Again, Olam Haba is the world to come, after the judgment, etc. Dangerous wires. Handle with care. The invention of the telephone has made it possible for someone to become a Baal Lashon Hora in the very comfort of his home. Of course, this is written a while ago, so now we have the internet, so we need not even explain that. Without expending excessive energy, beware of Lashon Hora when speaking on the telephone. If the person with whom you are converging insists on relating Lashon Hora, you should rebuke him. If this is not possible, find an excuse to hang up. Excuse me, something has just come up. The Lashon Hora. And discontinue the conversation. 4. There is no difference between freely volunteering Lashon Hora and being pressured into relating it. If someone would entice you to eat unkosher food, would the food then be permissible? The same principle would apply to Lashon Hora. David was burning with curiosity to find out the identity of a person who had done something wrong. Look, you can tell me. We've been good friends for years. I promise that I won't repeat it to a soul. Just give me a hint. If you don't tell me, I'll make you regret it. I won't budge until you give in. Regardless of David's persistence, his friend must steadfastly withhold the information. 5. Refusing one's parents or teacher. If your parents or teacher ask you for information about an incident, and you know that a reply will involve Lashon Hora, you are forbidden to answer them, despite your obligation to honor them. Of course, extreme care must be taken to word your refusal in a respectful manner. However, if this information is required for a beneficial and constructive purpose, you are not able to censure the wrongdoer yourself. Then you are permitted to relate this information to him. And that's a point that will come up in a person's objection to these laws. But there, it's covered, really. 6. Financial loss for refraining from Lashon Hora. Speaking Lashon Hora is not justified even if it will save you from a large financial loss. One is required to surrender his entire fortune in order not to violate any negative precepts. Mr. Goldberg's boss wanted his employees to make derisive comments about his competitors. The more caustic the comment, the higher the employee rose in his employer's esteem. Mr. Goldberg was fired from his job because he refused to speak Lashon Hora. Mr. Goldberg's loss of income caused him and his family much suffering and hardship. Nevertheless, he would not have been allowed to act differently in the circumstances. 7. When it is difficult to remain silent. If you find yourself in the company of people who are gossiping about others and you are not able to leave them, even though you may feel uncomfortable being the only silent person present, you are nevertheless forbidden to speak Lashon Hora. No person likes to appear dull or unsociable. However, the consolation is in the reward for such silence, which is in direct proportion to the difficulty endured. Pirkei Avos 5:25. Remember, it is better for a person to be considered a fool throughout his entire life by man than to be considered wicked for one moment in the eyes of God. Eduyus 5:6. Concerning such situations, the following words of our sages definitely apply. For every second that one remains silent, he will merit reward of a magnitude that is beyond the comprehension of even Malachim, celestial beings. Egeres Hagara. 8. Writing Lashon Hora. The transgression of Lashon Hora can be committed through speech or writing. Derogatory information in personal letters, books, newspapers, circulars, and wall posters constitutes Lashon Hora. Dear Sarah, since you have left, our friend Leah has been more spiteful than ever. Hannah and Rachel are failing in many subjects. You can hardly blame them, since the teachers are doing very poor jobs in preparing for classes. Don't forget to write all the news from your side of the ocean. Yours truly, Rikva. Before mailing a letter, check it for Lashon Hora. 9. Passing around a letter to belittle its writer. You are forbidden to show someone's letter to others in order to belittle its writer, even if you don't make any comments. If the reader will get the impression that the writer is lacking in general intelligence or in Torah knowledge, this constitutes Lashon Hora by way of innuendo or allusion. Mordecai received a letter from Chaim full of misquoted Talmudic statements, faulty logic, and spelling errors. He is forbidden to pass around the letter with the intention of ridiculing Chaim. 10. Sign language. You are forbidden to convey Lashon Hora through hints and signs, hand or finger motions, and facial expressions. Mr. Weiss is a considerate fellow. Sure he is, in a sarcastic tone. Joe is very honest. Sarah is extremely clever, with a wink of the eye. I didn't actually say anything bad about the fellow. Does not alter the fact that you have nevertheless conveyed a derogatory message. 11. When you include yourself, adding something derogatory about yourself when you disparage others does not mitigate the fact that you have spoken Lashon Hora. This includes instances when you mention that you and a friend both did the exact same action or have the same fault, and you begin by talking about yourself. Ben and I both shoplifted when we were younger. Nobody in our group studies Torah properly. I don't give enough charity, but neither does Mr. Stern. And that's it for Chapter 1. We'll pick up with Chapter 2 a little later. Thank you. As you can see, these restrictions are pretty serious for Orthodox Jewish communities. I think what's important is that all people can look at these codifications and have the wrongdoing properly illustrated in all its scenarios, etc., etc. So thanks again. We'll pick up later.